We gotcha. Don't you worry.
Just a quick question, Alyssa. Am I bringing up the presentation, or I sent a copy to you earlier today? Do you pull it up, or?
I do have it ready. You should be able to share, but if there are any sharing permission issues, then I can certainly pull it up for you and advance the slides.
Okay, I do have it here, so should be ready to go then.
Well, okay,
Thank
and
you.
I see that we are live streaming. So Graham, I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I would like to call this meeting of the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee to order. And please note that we have quorum present. So start off with the approval of the agenda. Staff, are there any changes to the agenda?
Hi there. Yes, Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Program Lead. Just confirming that there are 2 changes to the agenda, 2 added correspondence items that are found under item 5.1.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? So Andy and Carol? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. So does anyone have an interest in any of the items on today's agenda? Okay, that's good to see. So now it's the approval of the previous minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes as we sent out? Anyone have any concerns or problems with them? So may I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented? So Susan and Katie?
Sandra and Katie.
Then I apologize.
And just
So
confirming
no one
there,
was
sorry,
opposed.
Graham. Anyone opposed? No opposed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone opposed? And seeing none, that motion carries. So on today's agenda, we have 3 permits. So 3 permit applications, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Graham. Just need to, item 5 is the communication items first.
Okay, because it's on the other order I have it. So the communication items, we have 2 items of correspondence from Tim Podisich and Janice Brown. The recommendation is to be received and referred to the consideration during item 10.3. That anyone, do we need approval from this one, or just need a mover or a seconder?
Mover and a seconder, please. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. We have a mover and a seconder for this. Katie and Sandra, got it right this time. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Now on to the heritage permits. We have 3. We'll start with 10.1. Is there anyone here to discuss this item?
Hi there, Graham again. Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Program Lead. So this is an application for tree removals at Dundurn, Part 4 designated site. Our colleagues in forestry submitted this application. Unfortunately, they're not able to attend this evening, and heritage staff are available to answer any questions folks might have.
Okay, so did everyone get a chance to read the application? Does anyone have any concerns with it and understand it? Staff have anything special to say? Anything we should know? Just your standard 6 trees out. Oh, Andy's
Through
got
the
a question.
chair, yeah, pretty straightforward. 6 dead trees, 1 that's partially dead and unsafe as deemed by our expert forestry colleagues. The note she provided just identifies the location of the trees and gives some photos of them. And we're just looking at some standard conditions for this, and just any details in terms of any stump removal would come back through staff is what we're proposing.
Okay, thank you. Andy has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, just for clarity, obviously the trees are quite dead. Is there any provisions to replace trees approximately where they are or close to in the future at all? through the chair.
Yeah, thanks,
Melissa?
Andy. So through the chair, so as you might recall, there was a heritage permit earlier this year as a part of a larger climate change initiative replanting on site. So there was a previous approval for, I think it was upwards of 16 new tree plantings. That's partially coordinated with some of these removals. So as a part of this particular application, no, there's no new plantings proposed, but there was a previous permit for this site that came through the subcommittee for a substantial amount of new plantings on site.
Okay, thank you very much, Alyssa.
Anyone else have any questions or concerns? Let's move on to the vote. So, anyone, I need a mover and a seconder with this item to vote. Carol and Andy. Hey, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, this permit carries. Thank you. So now we're on to item 10.2, HP 224-036 at 122 McNabb Street South. It is the reconstruction of the wooden front steps in kind, including painting the new wood steps to match the previous color and selective masonry repointing. Is there anyone here for this item, or is the staff going to handle this one as well? I think staff's handling this one, aren't they?
Through the chair, yes, thank you, Graham. This application is retroactive, I'll note. Work had begun on dismantling the steps. They were originally supposed to do some repairs and then found an extensive amount of rot and had started reconstruction. So this work has begun. This is a retroactive heritage permit to come into compliance with the Ontario Heritage Act. It's essentially replacing the steps in kind. The existing previous steps were not heritage fabric. They were probably about 25 years old or so, pressure treated, painted. So this is essentially to match. They will be painted to match the previous color and the other trim on the property. And the masonry pointing that's needed at the ledger part where the new steps will tie back into the existing stone building. Staff have recommended a condition just to make sure that that's in conformity with the city's masonry restoration guidelines. So no concerns on staff's end. This is essentially to make sure that they meet their compliance under the Heritage Act and get the appropriate approvals to be able to finish the work.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. Okay, does anyone have any concerns or questions on this matter? Oh, seeing none, let's get a mover and a seconder for this permit. Katie and Sandra. Thank you very much. No, thank you. And now, is there anyone opposed to this motion? Seeing none, that carries. Thank you very much, Alyssa, for handling that for us. And now we're on to 10.3, HP 2024-033, 108 James Street North and 111 to 113 Jason Street North, the Tivoli Theater. And it's the demolition of the former Tivoli Theater's auditorium and the lobby structures. Staff will have a brief introduction regarding this application before our discussion. There's a number of people in attendance today to speak on this application, including from Avantis, Jason Smith, Mitch Gold, and Lloyd Ferguson. From Landwides, Edward John, and from VG Plus VG, Paul Saponzi, Dan Vajic, Vanessa Sanchez, and Deb Westman. So, Alyssa, you want to go with a quick staff review, please?
Thanks, Graham. Just a brief introduction, just for clarification. I know that there's a lot of community interest in this application, and there might be folks listening along, watching along online. So just wanted to give some clarification on this type of heritage permit application before the applicants give their presentation today. This type of application under the Heritage Act to demolish a building or structure that's designated under Part 4 of the Act does require a council decision. So following consultation and advice provided by this subcommittee tonight, staff will then prepare a report to the main Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee. There will be opportunity if folks in the community want to delegate at that meeting. Following consideration at that Heritage Committee, the recommendation on the application will then go to Planning Committee and then Council for a final decision. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear to folks who might be listening. And I will pass it over to, I believe, Deb, who might be leading tonight's presentation.
Before they start, I just want to let everyone know that the presentation may normally we give 5 minutes to applicants. This one will probably run a little bit longer, so please be patient and let the applicants finish this one off. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I just shared the presentation. Is it visible?
No, it's not.
Not yet, Deb. It
All
could just
right.
be delayed. We just give it a second. Sometimes there's a bit of a lag. And if not, I can try to share on my end.
I think that's the wrong
Sharing now.
piece.
Hi there, Deb. It's Alyssa. I'm seeing your screen right now. So the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee page. So you might just
Yes,
need to share either your application or bring your presentation over to that screen.
there we go. Is that visible now?
We are still just seeing your web page, the subcommittee's agenda page right now.
My apologies for this.
Oh, no problem. Sometimes, so you could try stop sharing, and when you click share, you can select the particular application you want to share. So whether that's PowerPoint or PDF or what you might have it in. Thanks to the members for your patience while we just figure out
Yes,
this technical difficulty.
We all live in a Zoom world now. We understand that not everything works perfectly.
We do in so many different applications, right? Deb, if you'd like, I can try to share on my end. Would you like me to try?
Sure, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay,
It
not a
just
problem.
doesn't seem it's just not coming up.
How are we doing now?
Thank you. Yes, I can see it. Can everyone else see the presentation? All right,
Just looking to
thank you.
see.
Then,
Okay. Just let me know and I'll advance for you. Thank you.
thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, welcome. Thank you everyone for having us here today. Maybe the next slide, please, Alicia. I'd just like to introduce the applicant team. As Alyssa mentioned, we have Aventus Developments here today, Landwise Urban Planning, and Plus Fiji Architects. And I'm Deb Westman, who worked on Heritage Architect and worked on the Cultural Heritage Impact Assessment. Next slide, please. So our goal tonight is to discuss the application for the Heritage Permit application, which is for demolition of the remaining lobby and the auditorium of the Tivoli Theater. And I'm sure you're familiar with it, but just included a couple of images. The top one is the view from James Street North, looking toward the remaining lobby and auditorium. And the lower image is taken from Houston Street, so you can see the big fly gallery of the theater just behind the plaza on the lower right. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide the committee with a brief overview of the CHIA and some additional information regarding the application. So just some key points we wanted to touch on, which is talking about the heritage value, the Tivoli Theatre timeline, some design alternates and investigations that were undertaken, current conditions, and conservation mitigation strategy. Next slide, please. The cultural heritage value, I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to look through the report. We did some comparison between the 1990 and 2004 designations and looked at it in 2024 as a comparison. And as the evaluation tools are provided in the OREG 56922, at this point in time, there's some design and physical value, which is the remaining Italian Renaissance style interior of the auditorium, as well as the historical and associative value through the significance of the Tivoli Theatre in the development of Hamilton's theatre and film industry and early entertainment district, as well as the legacies of the architects of the carriage house and of the auditorium addition, which was done in 1925. What has been lost, mainly due to the demolition of the Tivoli Theatre along James Street, is some of the context. Next slide, please. The 1990 designation cites some of the great features of the Tivoli building, designed as a carriage house originally, with its steeply pitched mansard roof and dormers, detailed bracketed cornices, and a lot of rich classical detailing. There's a lot of windows, round arched windows with 2/2 sash and ornate molded surrounds, gabled dormer windows, tall mansard roof tower. I think this is the image that lives in everybody's mind in thinking about the Tivoli Theatre. It's just distinguished. It was a high profile building along James Street North. Next slide, please. Thank you. And in 2004, the building experienced a collapse on the south wall and roof area. And as investigations were taking place, it was decided that it was just due to structural conditions, it needed to come down. And I believe they started with the top floor only first, but as they got into it, it required full demolition and the building was removed. Next slide, please. The heritage value remaining then is in the 2004 heritage designation, which is the auditorium of the Tivoli Theatre, designed in an Italian Renaissance style, as we mentioned earlier. And it's got some remaining significant attributes: the ceilings, the ornate plasterwork, the proscenium arch, the colonnades along the side walls, the statuary, and other decorative wall elements are identified. Next slide, please. The conditions have changed. I just wanted to flag a timeline here, which we provided in the report. We've added just some other additional timelines showing the 1990 designation, the 2004 demolition, and the 2004 designation on those dashed horizontal blue lines. The yellow orangey highlight areas basically shows the transfer of property. So you can see that after the building closed, the first one is in 1989. When the property transferred and began transferring through hands. And you can see after 2004, just the amount of transferring that took place. And the reason we wanted to flag this is that it has led to a decline and deterioration of the condition of the building. The blue box on the lower right, you can see is the timeline March in 2022 when it was purchased by Aventus. Next slide, please. As Aventus purchased the property and investigated the design for a new proposed residential complex, they explored various configurations on the property to include the theater auditorium. and also looked at adaptive reuse of the theater for a new occupancy. They also embarked on additional studies to conduct, get more up-to-date information on the current conditions, such as structural and some environmental. The building, including all details and character-defining elements, has also been documented at this point via 3D imaging for future reference and use. Next slide, please. The building under investigations that were undertaken, as I mentioned, was a structural review. Some of the findings were significant deterioration of exterior brick and clay tile walls on both the interior and exterior. There's loss of roof structure integrity due to ingress of water, which has damaged the gypsum-based deck panels, and there's roof collapse in areas. And rebuilding of the roof is required. Floor framing requires removal and reinforcement to meet current loading standards or loading requirements. The report concluded that the building should be considered past the point of restoration. And the building is currently shored to prevent further damage. Next slide, please. The environmental review indicates that there's designated substances and hazardous materials throughout the building, such as lead. They're in various paint and surface coatings, which were found to be in deteriorating conditions with extensive peeling and flaking and debris on surfaces throughout the building. There's suspected lead, mercury, silica, and PCBs in materials as well. Next slide, please. And there's significant asbestos in areas such as parging, insulation at the brick chimney, floor tile and mastic at the second floor projector room and washroom area, various floor leveling compounds and underlying floor mastic present in the front entrance area, parging cement, fitting insulation on pipes in the crawl space, thermal pipe insulation in crawl space below the front lobby area, plaster on walls, ceilings, ornamental moldings throughout the building, and asbestos on the textured finish on walls and ceilings in the storage room at the right corner of the backstage area. Next slide, please. This is a chart that we did to show just the timeline, basically from the 1885 carriage house, which became a theater and film house in 1907. And the building was occupied and running until 1989, when the collapse, or when it was closed, sorry, and designation came around that time. And as we start to see new purchases and new owners, the building started to decline, excuse me, and in 2004, we saw the collapse of the wall and roof area and the demolition of the James Street portion of the Tivoli Theater. Next slide, please. Just wanted to go through some of the conditions, current conditions in the building. This is looking back toward the projector room, which is elevated above on a second floor, excuse me, and a close-up view on the right-hand side. The finishes are damaged. In this area, there's a lot of water damage due to breach in the roof. It's also affected the floor framing of the projector room. Next slide, please. Excuse me. This is some of the shoring that's under that projector room floor, again, with water. And we've included observations from the structural report. And here they noted shoring up to the ceiling of roof structure. The ceiling has significant moisture damage and is on the verge of collapse. Shoring is installed, but may not prevent collapse of moisture-ridden gypsum panels. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Hi, folks. Sorry,
Yeah,
Alyssa
that would be
Golden
good,
here.
honey.
Carol, I
little
believe
cookie with good.
your mic is
Oh
on.
God. Okay.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Deb. Thanks.
No problem. Next slide, please. And this is looking at so as on the left-hand side, you can see as you're looking up through the seating, there's a significant roof breach in that corner, a significant amount of water damage, mold as well in this corner. You can see the plaster has come completely off in sections, undermining some of the brick. The comment and observation from the engineer is that brick and clay tile interior walls covered with plaster finish in most areas. The plaster is in poor condition. Where visible, clay tiles and bricks are in poor condition. And in this case, the clay tiles are a structural component of the exterior walls. Next slide, please. Brick and clay tile interior walls covered with plaster finish. Again, it's where visible, the clay tiles and bricks are in poor condition. Just more of a detail view here. And this is on the lower wall that you couldn't see because of the seating, but this is how the plaster and the construction of the wall has deteriorated because it's been soaking up the water and deteriorating. And you can see it continues to do that. Next slide, please. So the auditorium ceiling structure, we're looking at these are the features that have been identified, these significant heritage features, which are what remains. There are beautiful embellishments, decorative details in plaster, amazing things. But here we see the conditions of some of this where structure has required some modifications or temporary stabilization, and the ceiling itself has come loose in many areas. The plaster has delaminated. Next slide, please. In this area, deterioration to clay, tile, and brick at the inside of the walls. They're in poor condition, and considerable cracking of brick walls was also observed. This is in the lower level below the lobby. Next slide, please. This is some of the roof damage, view of that. Basically a gypsum-based panel. The Ciparex roof structure shows damage at the penetrations. Several areas are stained, suggesting moisture damage. Ciparex roof structure loses significant integrity when it's wet. Next slide, please. And of course, everything's affected, but the statuary remains. They're standing in place, have deteriorated somewhat. The statues actually were also investigated as part of just looking into this further. In both the designations, 1990 and 2004, the statues are noted as bronze, but they've both been tested, and it turns out they're plaster, not bronze. So that would explain some of the kind of deterioration that we're seeing on them. Overall, they're in fair shape, but some repair and remediation is required. Also, the restoration of these is complicated by the asbestos fibers that are coating everything actually in the space, as it's noted in the environmental report. Next slide, please. This is the lobby area, and you can see the paint and coats peeling due to moisture in this area. Just so everyone's aware, the slide on the left was a view out to where the lobby entrance would have been. Thank you, Liz. That view on the left would be where the lobby exited out to James Street originally. Next slide, please. And just some images showing on the left example of moisture damage on the lower walls throughout the rooms below the stage area. The middle shot, there's water damage and mold growth in the west corner of the south elevation, and this view is from the second floor. On the right, there's water damage ceiling and mold growth on the second floor. These are from the hazardous materials report. Next slide, please. I think probably this is such a significant statement in the environmental report. The condition of the asbestos-containing plaster throughout the building is extremely poor, evidenced by widespread damage to plaster and walls. Debris from this asbestos plaster can be found throughout the premises. Consequently, it's recommended to treat all building surfaces as contaminated with asbestos fibers due to the extent of plaster damage and debris present. And that's out of the report from earlier this year. Next slide, please. These are some of the exterior building conditions from the report. Just looking at the east elevation, it's considered to be in fair condition. There's some deterioration and staining of the brick around the existing window and door openings. The next one is the north elevation. The brick wall is noted to be in poor condition. Also, the two slides below it show significant mortar loss at the brick joints throughout the wall and staining from water and water damage mainly. The top right images on the west elevation, where there would have been the original Tivoli building attached, showing the wall is considered to be in poor condition. The west elevation, the images below that, showing brick missing, like there's large chunks of it actually missing, crumbling and missing in several areas. Large portions of the wall are missing in the southwest corner. Next slide, please. Some concrete steps. Mainly the roof below shows a lot of the deterioration. Being in poor condition, there's vegetation growing on the roof and moisture in some collapsed areas. Next slide, please. So I think looking at this statement or summary of deterioration, that you can see how it's complicated in terms of even if it's remediated or how it's treated, especially the heritage features that have been so important and significant to this space. But it's been diminishing since the closure of the theater in 1989. Also since the demolition of the original Tivoli building, the carriage house, in 2004 after the collapse of the roof and the south wall. Also, there's been deferred maintenance by various owners since that time and general extensive deterioration by neglect over the past 20 years or so. Next slide, please. So the conservation is guided by the provincial planning statement, specifically that significant built heritage resources and significant cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved. Development and site alteration may be permitted where the proposed development and site alteration has been evaluated and it has been demonstrated that the heritage attributes of the protected heritage property will be conserved. So those are the goals guiding this forward. And the purpose of the CHIA is to demonstrate how the Tivoli Theatre will be impacted and conserved in the context of redevelopment. Next slide, please. So in the design, and Aventus proposes to mitigation measures to the demolition, which would include some design development features that are to commemorate the original carriage house structure on James Street North through its massing, fenestration, and materials that reference the early building and reestablish urban fabric of the streetscape. Some of the images of this proposal are in the document itself, the Cultural Heritage Impact Assessment. There's also commemoration of the landmark features associated with the Tivoli, such as the James Street North Marquee, the main entrance, and storefront by integrating these elements into the new design. And the Tivoli Theatre experience, to commemorate the experience of the Tivoli Theatre in the new development, beginning with a publicly accessible interpretive lobby space at ground level with a collection of interpretive materials from the original Tivoli Theatre. A dedicated elevator will take visitors to an event space designated in the grandeur of the Tivoli Theater Auditorium interior with extensive views of the city of Hamilton and its significant landscape beyond. Next slide, please. Thank you. That wraps up this portion of the presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or our team would be happy to answer them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your display. Remind the members of the Permit Review Committee, it was mentioned several times carriage house. It's not a carriage house. It was a carriage factory. I don't know
Sorry,
why
yes,
they got that
yes.
wording right or wrong, but all through the document, you'll see it's wrong, but it was a form of a carriage factory. So I want people to understand the difference. Okay, so now that we've had time to consider it, I'm sure there's a significant amount of questions from everybody. So if you'd like to get started, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I see Andy. Is anyone else? Can't see Carol for some reason. So pretty well everybody. So I'll go with
I have,
Andy.
Sorry, Graham, Melissa here. I have Andy, Matthew, Katie, and then Steve for the speakers list.
And
And
Jeannie. And then Carol at the end.
And then Carol. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to get started. So let's start with Andy.
Okay, so through the chair, just a question. I'm just concerned of the condition of the building if it's classified as by neglect. There seems to be a lot of weather-related damages over the years, whether it be water and what have you, and any building is going to get to a certain situation that may need demolition if it isn't properly protected. And I'm just wondering if the past owners or the current owners have done any kind of protection from the elements to try to keep the rain, winds, freezing at bay to try to protect it at all, or if it was just let go and allowed the building to get to this state where the application is put in for demolition. Through the chair. Thank you.
So whoever is the best on the team to answer that would be nice.
Through the chair, Edward John, planner for Landwise. Hope you can hear me. See that you can. Great. So certainly, my understanding from the role of Aventus when they did come in, they were obviously looking to maintain the property. They have done a number of works, certainly to assist with the structural element. There was been repairs to mortar. The roof has been the challenging piece of this all, even getting up to the roof and looking for a permanent ability to solve some of that water damage. It was extensive, obviously, before they purchased the property, but continues to be a challenge to have any permanent changes because of the structure of the roof. But throughout the actual building itself, a number of repair measures have been taken. But unfortunately, the state of disrepair by the time they were already making those changes made that incredibly challenging.
Thank you. Got a follow on to that, Andy, or okay?
No, thank you. That's all I have right now.
Okay, so next on the list is Matthew. Matthew, you can ask a question.
Hi, Matthew.
Not
Sorry,
hearing you.
Alyssa here. Yeah, I'm not sure. There was something faintly when you first started to talk. I'm not sure if you have a mic you're able to turn up.
So still can't. It's not saying that you're muted either. Well, we'll go on to Katie and see if we can figure out your microphone issue, and then we'll come back to you. Okay, Matthew? Thank you. Okay, Katie?
Okay, can you all hear me? Perfect. Okay.
Yep.
So I guess my main questions are about the proposal for the new, like the new proposal. I feel like I can understand if the current building is sort of beyond repair or restoration. But I feel a little bit like in terms of sort of preserving some of the like associative heritage value of the Tivoli Theater having been a theater and a community space and everything like that. I feel like the application doesn't speak very much to the proposal in the new building for what is actually going to be there. You know, you say there's going to be an interpretive center, but I don't really know what that means. And so I'm just wondering if there can be any more details provided on that of, you know, both the interpretive center and the I think I can't the wording of it, the Sky Bridge like event space, sort of what that actually looks like and how it speaks to Tivoli, I guess.
Well,
Okay.
through the chair, Edward John Planner. So I can start, and certainly Deb or others can join in. So the original intent was obviously to integrate the existing theatre to a new event space, and you're right, you picked up, you know, really providing public access to that. Since obviously this exhaustive study and a number of other studies that have facilitated the decision to where we are today, we are still in flux as to what that new design will be. Obviously, this is a significant component of that. We are entertaining, you know, creating an iconic building or two towers at this location, and at this point, looking at some of the engineering pieces to establish that. As you mentioned in that Sky Bridge, the idea of bringing that we can still bring public up to that new position, but I can certainly pass on to Deb as to how that interpretive space will be conducted, both at grade and then for the components that would be on that. But it's still too early to really finalize what that new design will be. We've had to change tack a little bit on this one based on some of the studies that we've done to date. So that's where we're thinking currently, but we've still got a number of studies to inform that, not only just the engineering, but the intent is to continue to provide an event space that brings the public to be able to share in some of those components. And I'm not sure, Deb, if you had anything additional or others additional to add, but it really is that it's early in the design stage for what we're now trying to achieve with this, recognizing, you know, no longer are we able to integrate the auditorium as it stands.
Okay, so can anyone explain the interpretive part of it, the question?
Sure, I'll jump in here, and others are welcome to as well. Part of what's being considered is that is a public accessible lobby, and that's the interpretive space where you'd walk in at street level and see some of the materials of because of the condition of the features, they may not be able to be you know, the actual feature. But there'll be commemorative information in there on the building itself, ideally some beautiful large photos of the building and the spaces and the times that there's some fantastic interior shots around of the space. And I think, you know, the intent in the design as you go through the building and up to the elevator and up to another Tivoli Theater type of space is to just feature the grandeur of the space and to appreciate that in a new way, basically. And as Edward said, it's very preliminary. Those are just that's the features and how it might be supported at this point.
Hey, thank you. Is that everything you need, Katie, or you gonna need to follow up?
Yeah, I guess that's good enough for me for now. I might hear what other people have to say and then come back around. But...
Okay, thank you. So, Steve?
I think Katie covered my question. Really, I was going to ask if there was any drawings or artistic renderings of what these plans would look like, but I think this has been spoken to already.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Can I just add something, Mr. Chair?
Sure, go ahead, Lloyd.
It just, the intent here is, as Edward says, is to build an iconic building, something that would really showcase Hamilton. And as far as the artifacts that are in the theater, they'd be available to the city if they wanted to use them, or we could put them in the interpretive center, which is, it's right now, it's all very preliminary, but about 800 square foot room on the ground floor that the public would be welcome to come in and see. And as Deb said, there'd be a number of pictures. If we can salvage the, but it's questionable because they're plaster, but the Julius Caesar figures, because they're not bronze as we expected, they're plaster. But anything that you think is interpretive, clearly the deformed plaster that's got asbestos can't be moved. It could be replicated, but I know heritage people don't like that word, replication, but it could be replicated in that area. And then you would take an elevator up to the Tivoli Event Center. And it's very preliminary, depending on market conditions and depending on design and features. Our intent is to build a bridge between the two towers. There would be an event center. There could be a restaurant in there. There could be areas where the public could rent as hallways with a gorgeous view of the city. And so that's our plan. So any artifacts that can be salvaged and you would like them put in that interpretive center, we could do that. Or the city could put them somewhere else in the city. We can offer them to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so now we'll go back to Steve. Sorry, that was Steve's question. I apologize. Sandra.
Thank you. I wondered if there's anybody that can identify what are the character defining attributes on the inside. We're talking about objects that will be fit in the lobby of an 800 square foot. But when I see these pictures here, I mean, it's really the grand oval space. Yes, we don't see drawings as yet. The first question is, when will we see drawings of the new proposal? And two, can we dig a little deeper as to what those interior character defining attributes are? Is somebody able to list those out? Maybe Deb can.
Yes, thank you. So the elements are basically the colonnade on each side of the theater, the proscenium arch, the plaster ceiling, all the ornate details, basically. And that was in the 2004 designation.
Okay. And what about the space, the oval space with the sort of the grand ceiling? Is that also listed?
Yep, the auditorium ceiling. Yeah, it's all part of it, basically. It's kind of speaks to the plaster ceiling and the detailing.
And is that
Oval ceiling.
10,000 square feet? What's the size of that?
I'm not exactly sure offhand.
How many seats is the theater? Is it 500 seat? 1,000?
Oh, it's 2,000. Yeah, yeah.
2,000. Yeah. So how is that going to be expressed in terms of an interpretive way in a lobby that's 800 square feet? Has that been discussed as yet? And maybe the lobby is not the right location to be doing that.
Well, the reason
So as an architect,
the reason we selected the ground floor is so it could be open to the public and be free of charge. They can come in there and look at the interpretive center. But as I said earlier, we're wide open to any suggestions that the city or this committee or others may have of what we should be putting in this interpretive center. And the size is up for negotiation too. But there's not much left that's salvageable, unfortunately, as Deb said in her presentation. And it's pretty hard to move the big arch when it's at least with asbestos and deteriorating from water damage. But we're wide open for anything you want to see replicated or moved that's possible into that event center. We can consider that.
yeah, I think the question is just about the interpretation. We need to maybe dig a little deeper in how that's going to be represented above and beyond photographs or just pieces of artifacts. How is that story going to be, let's say, represented in an architectural experience? Is more my question. And it sounds like we're not there yet, but I'm putting it out there because there's an opportunity there that, you know, that could be beneficial, you know, to you.
Could you take that, Deb?
Yes, thank you. No, good, very good comment.
Through the chair, if I might, again, Alyssa Golden, Culture Heritage Program Lead, in terms of what the outcome of some of the preliminary plans that are identified, preliminary strategies for conservation interpretation that are identified in the HIA that was provided with this application. Staff, in terms of draft potential conditions for consideration to the subcommittee, have suggested that a conservation strategy be prepared that includes a conservation plan in terms of whether any of the elements are actually able to be actually salvaged or would need to be replicated, an interpretation plan, formal documentation and salvage report, and a set of design guidelines related to that sort of Second Empire, former Heritage Factory component that might be recreated on James Street. Staff have proposed that if the subcommittee was supportive of conditional approval of the application, that could be a condition that would come back through staff, but it would be up for the subcommittee to consider whether any further details, amendments, or changes to that potential draft condition be proposed as a part of your deliberations.
Thank you for the clarification, Alyssa. Okay, so now we see Matthew's back. We can try your question.
How are we now, Chair?
Ah, beautiful.
Great. Sorry for that inconvenience there. And I know I just arrived back when there was some discussion about the statues, so my apologies if this has been asked already. So my understanding is that the Stephen Dell report clarified the staff report about the materials being used. Originally, it was believed to be bronze when it is plaster. So I'll direct this question to staff. Is there any precedent in Hamilton or within Ontario's heritage community of displaying plaster statues meant to represent original bronze Greek statues? And this might be a subjective question, so if you can't ask the second part, that's fine. But in the eyes of heritage, does the material of the statue impact its worthiness of being restored?
Through the chair to Matthew. So unfortunately, no, I'm not aware of a similar situation to be able to point to, or a sort of comparable situation in terms of displaying statues. In terms of the material itself, so I would say that the clarification of the material does not impact its heritage value. It's a part of the Italian Renaissance style of the original motif and design of the theater. However, to the points made during the applicant's presentation in terms of the reality of what the potential alternatives are to actually salvage, because we now know it's plaster, and the hazardous materials and other challenges with that, now recognizing the material of the statues, I think that is relevant in terms of just understanding what is feasible and what mitigative approaches and interpretation and conservation approaches are available to us.
Hey, does that answer your question, Matthew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Okay, any follow-up? Follow on to that one? Okay, seeing none, we'll head on to Carol. Your turn, Carol.
Okay. Yeah, I read the CHIA report, especially the condition report, which I know that a lot of the proposal rests on the condition report. and the statement that the restoration of this particular part of an original theater is not feasible. I actually know that it's expensive, and a major part of the argument rests on asbestos. Through the report, I noticed that, and I don't know how usual this is, but that they listed places where they found asbestos, and that list was a certain length of places. And then there was another list, which was presumed places. In other words, places that hadn't been tested, but were probably. And then another list, which was even less probable than that, like maybe. So there was quite a huge identification of areas that were not confirmed. So that's number one about condition that kind of concerned me. I think that an argument is being made to demolish it. That's what I know. I've been in Heritage a very long time. I've worked for the Ontario Heritage Trust. I've worked for the provincial government. I've worked for the federal government. I've seen buildings that are in this condition, and they're not demolished, especially when they're designated. The thing is, and it's a dilemma all the time. It's like, what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it when an owner, a developer, takes on this kind of predicament of a designated building that has been neglected for so many years through a number of owners. So I don't have the answer to that, but I know that it has been done, and I don't believe the case is really sound enough to just demolish the building. So that's about the condition report, and it's only one point. I have other points that I could make that sort of speak to what to do with what's left in there. And this comes up many times. I've reviewed so many GIA reports and permit applications, and I know that there is a way of trying to balance what you're taking away, in other words, the designated building in the community, with some perks, I call them. I'm not putting them down. In other words, that interpretation space and using the statutes, that's not the designated building. And actually, when an owner takes possession of a property with a designated building, the whole point is that they know they're going to have to maintain it. Everyone knows that when they buy it, but there is a terrible trend in this city and other places, although I've never seen it quite as bad as in this town, where owners do buy properties with designated buildings. And I can't really direct this at the owner of this property right now because they've only had it for a few years. And I have spoken with them actually when they bought it about their plans. They seemed very, very, interested in incorporating it. But it's just too often that that people who have designated properties on their designated buildings on their properties do delay restoration, even maintenance at all, heat, all of these basic things that, keep the building from rotting, and leave it until it falls down. And it's interesting that we're talking about this when we just had, of course, everybody knows about the Gore buildings, which we fought to save for years, have just collapsed. And I know that I did review, I worked on saving those with the group that, worked very hard. And then, we had permits. I did see just like this study, I did see the proposed drawings of what they were going to do with it. And I said, this looks fabulous. As a matter of fact, it was in the newspaper that, somebody from Permit Review said, this is a great proposal. And then, of course, the buildings fall down. So you see, it's really, it's difficult to be in a position, which I believe is responsible on a committee like this, where, you are sort of recommending, you're kind of trying to get to the bottom of things, and people are saying things that they don't plan on doing. That's neither here nor there, maybe now, when I'm giving my points here. But, you know, I think I'm trying to sort of ask the other, I call it the other side now, because I'm like a total heritage preservationist person. But I can understand the dilemmas that face owners, but I want you to see, in a way, what is happening around us, what we keep seeing, what we keep dealing with, and what we keep putting our energy into. And it is really to help the owners. That's what we're here for. And it doesn't seem to be working, because we lose everything, or at least a lot of everything, except maybe somebody redoes a veranda, which is nice. But anyway, I know I'm sounding very cynical, and I'm sorry for that, but probably the building's falling down. But the other thing I want to point out and ask is, and this is a bit to staff, is that the recreation of a facade, which to me is another kind of bonus, you know, that you want to play against tearing the building down. You want a recreation of a carriage factory facade on James. Yeah, I've seen these recreations as well, and I saw the drawing, and I understand the drawing in the study is not going to be what it looks like, but I'm telling you, you can't recreate it, so it just looks pretty terrible. I don't think that I would you know, bet on that being something that's going to show the public, the community, that you know, the Tivoli Theatre used to be there. I think it's not feasible anyway, but you know, you can have a few arches and a few windows of the same proportion, and it just, I have never seen it work. The only thing that works is restoring the building that's there. So I just want to get this all out, and I thank you for your time. I've gone over, I think, everything except one thing I just want to, and this actually is just to go back a little bit to help in a way. You're dealing with the Permit Review Committee, but you will be dealing with the public and council as well on this, because I think that, you know, they've seen that a lot of this has happened, and people are going to be, especially the Beasley Neighborhood Association, which the building or the site is in Beasley, and tomorrow night there's a meeting. And I remember when Diamante, which was the owner in the late teens, like around, I think we met with him in 20, not him, his son, Diane Dent and I, we met with him, and he wanted to put up 2 21-story towers. And I remember that the BNA meeting was very well attended, and Jason Farr was there, and there was a real backlash to even having those towers on this corner, because, as you know, and I saw it in the study too, because the study is extremely good at the beginning, where, you know, it tells all the background and gives all the heritage after. It's really a great study for you know, people finding out about that site. But yeah, there was a backlash because James Street North, right at that spot, and north and south, is a heritage district. And during the kind of preliminary work on the tower, the tower building study, which was done, and I was also involved in that. Apparently, you know, there aren't supposed to be any buildings of that height in that area, but then owners apply for permission to do this. So that's what started it all. It was actually before this particular owner. That's what began it, was with the 21-story double towers, and then with the theater in the middle of it, and going through the theater to get to the other building, and this sort of thing. But so it's kind of hard, I think, to propose the demolition of this, even though it's in terrible condition. But I have seen things in this condition that has been restored, and asbestos can be remediated. I know this. I'm living in a condo right now that's got asbestos in the ceiling, which we have to remediate ourselves. So I don't want to get into, asides all over the place, but yeah, I do feel quite strongly about this, but I must say, I do understand totally what you're up against, and I understand the condition. It's terrible, and we've been harping about it for years, the heritage people, so that the owners wouldn't have gotten it in this condition, but it somehow just, didn't happen where it was monitored as closely as it should have been. So anyway, I know that I'm sort of going around in circles, but I hope I've gotten out the main points and the questions about things like, being able to staff, making sure that the recreation part is not just a token. Not to say that that's why you do it, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, Alyssa, honey, do you have something to say? You got your
Thank
hand
you,
up.
Carol. Yes, through the chair, just to speak to that. So in terms of what we would potentially see if this was conditionally approved and there was a requirement for a conservation strategy, there would be a component in terms of design guidelines and how they would approach any sort of paying homage to the former Second Empire building that was on James Street North and what that new development would look like. As many folks around the table are aware, typically we wouldn't recommend sort of trying to recreate fake heritage, but it would be trying to pay homage to that architectural style with a modern interpretation of it. So those are things that we would be looking for at a staff level. If that were to be a condition of approval, that would come back through us in terms of what approaches are being taken with that design and working with the applicant through that process.
Good, okay. And there are some nice murals around, you probably noticed too. We could have heritage building murals would be quite nice.
Okay.
Of past buildings. Anyway, okay,
Okay,
thanks a
Carol,
lot.
was there any questions of the participants you wanted to ask, or that was just to make a comment and ask one to
Yeah, I
staff?
wanted to give a little of the background that I knew about or that I was there for. And also, I had a question about the condition report, which I think I answered myself.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now my own questions. You guys have bought this building in 2022, correct? Is that the right year? So this asbestos you knew or highly suspected was already there. So that really shouldn't be a concern of yours because you should have had a plan for the asbestos when you bought the building, correct? Anyone make a comment from the...
Through the chair, yes, certainly there was expectations that this was going to be a challenging site, and I will speak on behalf of the owners. They were initially very excited to contemplate what they could do with this space, recognizing the challenges. It isn't a singular issue. Asbestos is absolutely a compelling issue, but there are structural issues with this, and I know the team looked at just restoration as is with no development. What would that take? And it is because of the fabric of the building, the occupancy requirements that would be needed through the process, that there were structural elements with the existing conditions that just created that challenge. They came to this with the expectation of being able to be good stewards of that. They've had a rich history of dealing with heritage structures, but when it was combined collectively with all the challenges, that just wasn't the feasibility based on some of that deterioration in structural integrity of the building. So appreciate your position. They absolutely were aware. And I will say, as far as excited about the proposition of doing something very special here, but through the past 18 months of study, and this building has been unoccupied without heating and cooling, for best part of a decade now. It looks like it. There were challenges in every turn, which wasn't just economic feasibility. It was, how they would be able to do the works necessary and keep the fabric as it is already. So, there's a whole sequence of steps they've reviewed, and we're happy to share more on that process. But the initial thoughts, absolutely, this was going to be challenging, but this was an opportunity. And unfortunately, we are here today with the outcome that is that we're unable and untenable options in front of us.
Yeah, as I look at it from a point of view of a heritage advocate. This building was purchased with the eye of restoration, and I cannot see it has deteriorated that much in the last year and a half, 2 years. Was it deteriorating in the last 20 years? Sure. But a lot of the stuff that's deteriorated was that way when you purchased the building. So your eyes should have been wide open when you walked into it. So I'm of the mind that we should be holding you, judging by this report, back to fixing the building, restoring it, retaining it, making sure it's there for future generations to appreciate like we did. I remember the last movie I think I saw in there was Pink Floyd's The Wall. Like I remember being in this theater. The last theater I had a cigarette in because it was still smoking back then. It's just one of those things. It touches my heartstrings, this particular theater. And I know that with enough effort and expense, and it's going to be expensive. Well, I do not deny that. But if you put the effort into it, you can fix it. Get a roof back on it. Get some heat on it. Stop the deterioration right now. And then look at your plan for how do you fix the interior. That's the way I kind of look at it. So I'm not going to be supporting the permit review, like the conditions of the permit. I know other members are like they're going to make their own minds up, but I want to see it saved. And if anyone read the letters from the two delegates, you can actually make comment on those in here if you wish as well at this point. Okay, does anyone else have any follow-up questions now that I've said my 2 cents worth?
I see Matthew had his hand up before, and then Sandra.
Okay, so Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, there's another question for staff. I was wondering, and obviously every site is unique, unique weather and issues and issues, issues related to location. Is there any precedent that Heritage is aware of in the last decade in Southwestern Ontario, Greater Toronto area, of a theater with this degree of issues related to asbestos, water damage, structural damage, where a developer was able to restore either to its previous use of a movie theater slash film house, or adapt or restore a higher degree of the original use than this site is currently. Is there any example that staff might be aware of?
Thanks, Matthew. Through the chair, I'll say, although we stay up to date with sort of best practices and what's happening, regionally and nationally, I'm not aware of a similar example in terms of deterioration and restoration of a theater. In terms of plaster work, and I think a little bit of a different scenario. I mean, we can look to the Lister block in terms of that restoration of how much deterioration there was, although I think the extent of heritage features specifically relating to plaster work that's deteriorated are not comparable. This is a very different scenario. So I would probably look to Deb potentially in terms of her experience working across other jurisdictions and the work that they would have done putting together the heritage impact assessment, if she's able to potentially speak to your question directly.
There are lots of renovations done. Can't think of a theater offhand, but similar theater type spaces. And it depends on the individual situation, what's involved in terms of how these are addressed. So our firm certainly goes back a long way in all kinds of levels of conservation, including remediation, and but as I said, that like it's specific to each place pretty much. I don't know if anybody
Okay.
else in our team would like to speak to that, but anyway, thank you.
Okay, so Matthew, any follow up to that one?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. And Sandra had a question, correct?
Yes. So I noticed halfway through the report there was shoring that had been installed underneath the projection space. Curious to know when those were installed, and is this recent or is that?
So through the chair to this committee member, my understanding it was done with the current owners. They certainly did some of the shoring. I'm not exactly sure the extent to which shoring was there previously, but they have been maintaining the property in that 18 months period, doing a number of measures to ensure the existing integrity as they received it was maintained and were available and appropriate, doing improvements. But I don't have the exact details of all of the works done since they took ownership.
So when I see that as an architect in the heritage field as well, I see that there's been some, let's say, some interventions to try to slow down the deterioration. And when I see that big open space, I didn't see any caving structure in that big oval space. Those are really large spans that we're seeing. And my question is, why didn't we see any sort of structural, temporary kind of measures within that large space? And I would presume that there would be different levels of severity throughout the building. So the question is maybe to Deb, was the level of severity structurally looked at in terms of what was fair, good, and really bad? Because in the beginning of the conversation, the presentation, it seemed as though it was the whole building was bad.
Thank you. Yes, and through Mr. Chair, the areas identified, there's not a breakout that I'm aware of building condition and talking about each area of low, medium, or high priority done. This was all based on the structural engineer's report that identified these specific areas, including some roof framing areas that are damaged. Yes, there's an edge near the space that is damaged. There's a truss up above, I believe, but that's at the edge and not in the center of the span, as you're noting.
So when we see the shoring below the projection space, was that decided because that was the most severe space that was collapsing and the rest of it was okay when the structural engineer, saw the space?
I think there were recommendations for shoring, so that's not the only area. That's one of the key spaces for the key areas of the theater space. But there are other areas such as the brick on the exterior, some of the areas that we looked at even down below with mold and some deteriorating structures down there.
Through the chair, if I might, again, Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Program Lead.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
I'm not sure if any of the representatives from the applicant on the call are able to further clarify, but I seem to recall that the shoring may have been the result of there was an opportunity for staff, municipal law enforcement, heritage staff, and the applicant to meet on site. There were some concerns about the northwest corner that were reported, that were dealt with, and some intermediate repairs were made following that order last fall in terms of repointing on the exterior. And I believe that's around the time that shoring also went up in relation to that review and those issues, but I'm not sure if anyone is able to further speak to that on the applicant team.
Mr. Chair, I can't necessarily speak to when that shoring went up. I believe it was during the current ownership. And you can see the pictures in various parts of the building where they put structural members up to try to hold the floor up. But one thing that stuck in my mind from the consulting engineer who did the structural assessment told us not to put anybody on the roof because they could go through it. And health and safety is a very important issue in these types of structures and everything else. And we'd all hate to see what happened on King Street happen here. And we're trying to prevent that when we go through this very comprehensive process. But the owners have a lot of experience in heritage buildings. If you've ever been to the Ancaster Mill, they restored that. That's their site. The Cambridge Mill, same thing. The Elora Mill, same thing. And they restored all those and repurposed them into really nice restaurants. And so they surround themselves with the right professionals to help them design it and to construct it. They had their vision of what they wanted it to look like, but they really surround themselves with the right professionals. But here it's pretty clear that this is not salvageable, and we wouldn't want to see something come down on Houston Street because there's a lot of pedestrian traffic through that area, as you just experienced on King Street. Now, I wish that we had the structural engineer with us today, but we don't, but we can arrange for him to be at the Heritage Committee when it moves on to that location. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Life. It would be really nice to have the structural engineer present to ask some questions. It's a real shame we couldn't be here. Any other committee members want to follow up with clarification? Any more concerns? No? We're all done? Oh, that was a little quicker and easier than I thought. So listen, you go ahead.
Sure, thanks to the chair, if I may. So in the note sheet provided to you by staff, there is potential draft conditions if the subcommittee is interested in potentially moving a motion to approve the application subject to conditions. I can pull those up if that is sort of where people are leaning, or you can also move a motion. We would need a decision and advice from the subcommittee on how this should be processed at this meeting before we then move on to the main Heritage Committee. So I'd be happy to pull up those draft conditions if folks would like to consider them as a part of your deliberation.
Yeah, and once we read them, we can, if we wish, suggest more clarification of.
And if I could just, Mr. Chairman, add one more thing, then I'll be quiet, is that I forgot another important building that the current owners have just signed an MOU for. That's the Toronto Hydro building in Niagara Falls, the one that's right up against the river, the big stone building. They've now signed, they're in the throes of finalizing the contract to restore that into what's the same, a similar type of thing, a very iconic building. And so that just again sets out their experience and the trust in their experience that the Niagara Falls, Niagara Parks have put into it. Thank you.
Wait. Okay, so we have the conditions before us. The conservation strategy including a conservation plan, a rotation plan, documentation, salvage report, and guideline. Everyone can read it themselves when we read it out for. So get a chance to read through it, get it in your mind what's there and what's not there, because sometimes that's just as important as what is there. Anyone have any questions with these conditions? Carol?
Hi, sorry. I was reading it and now I can't see it, so I was just
Yeah,
wondering
we're on a
if it
blank
was.
page, yes.
Oh, yeah, if I could just like get the other 2 points I missed. If I could read those, thank you. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I have a question on this.
Okay, go ahead.
On the first condition, and that is that it says it asks for these things, a strategy, including all these things, a strategy in accordance with the recommendations of the CHIA. So the CHIA, I find, recommends demolition. So then we're asking for a conservation strategy with the considering it's going to be demolished. I mean, according to the CHIA report. So I don't know if I quite to the satisfaction of the. So I don't know about prior to the application. And yeah, do you know what I'm getting at, or I'm not being very clear?
Yeah,
that the
Caroline,
site-
maybe if I
Yeah.
may, through the
Yeah.
chair, just so these would be potential conditions for approval of the application as submitted, which is to demolish. So if this subcommittee is interested in pursuing another recommendation beyond approving the proposed demolition subject to these conditions, then you could look to deliberate on what you would like to vote on.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, super. So I'm not voting on this part right now. No.
No, we're just going to talk about if these are all the conditions that we're happy with, or we think are enough for the building, or should we add more? And this isn't, again, we're talking, the recommendations are in voting for the demolition.
Right.
Not,
Okay.
we're saying the recommendation to save the building isn't there. We either approve or deny the permit as applied for, which is they're applying for a demolition.
Okay. Okay. I got you. Okay.
Okay, does anyone have any conditions they wish to add to that list? Everyone think that's enough? I can't, of course, I
Graham,
cannot always see everybody.
I see Katie has her hand up.
Okay, Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't actually have any conditions that I want to add to it because I don't want to approve, like I don't want to vote in favor. And so I don't know what we do in that situation. I need I guess a little bit of clarification of what I'm supposed to do instead.
As long as you don't approve anything, you're fine. But you can add recommendations and still vote against the recommendations that you put up.
So Graham, if I may clarify, so normally in most situations with heritage permits, we have some draft conditions, and if members are supportive, someone will move and second, and then it'll be voted on. Graham, I think, was just deliberating to see if the potential conditions, if anything, wanted to be added to before you then saw if there was a mover and seconder. But maybe it would be helpful, Graham, if you call to see if we do have a mover and seconder to consent with conditions, and then we can go from there. We'll see if that gets defeated or not, if that works.
Okay. Okay, so do you have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations as to the permit?
So I'm seeing no mover or seconder. So in the absence of a recommendation from the subcommittee to approve with conditions, staff will need a decision on this. The other two options for advice on this application would be to approve with no conditions or to recommend refusal. So Graham, you can make a call to see if anyone wants to move one of those
Okay,
other
so-
recommendations.
Yes. So does anyone wish to proceed with the recommending and seconding denying the permit as applied for? You have a mover
Sure.
and a seconder?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that. Do you mind?
Okay, so the first time we asked for mover and seconder was to approve for the permit based upon the recommendations we saw on the screen.
Okay.
No one wished to move them. So
Right.
now we're looking for people. If anyone wishes to make a motion to deny the permit that they've applied for.
Oh, yes, okay. Me.
Okay, so Carol and Katie. Is there anyone opposed to denying the permit?
If I may just ask Graham, just because this is a bit of a unique scenario, if we could just get a confirmation of raised hands who supports
who
the
wish to
motion
vote
to refuse.
Okay.
Yeah, so who is
Okay.
supporting the
So
motion
this is
to
the
refuse?
opposite.
Yeah.
Who's
just-
supporting the motion to refuse the permit?
See, D, Katie, Carol, Graham, Matthew.
Sandra,
And
can you
Steve.
say anything by voice? Because you don't have a screen on.
It does
So-
carry. I don't see Sandra. It
Yeah.
does carry though in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members voting in favor to refuse as per the motion.
Okay,
Okay. Well, thank you very much, guys. I
thank you.
really appreciate the effort you put into this, and I'm sorry for the applicants because it came before us and didn't get it through. So, what's our next steps, Alyssa?
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, through the chair. So this subcommittee's advice will go into our staff report. The next step with this heritage permit application is consideration at the main Heritage Committee. 13th is the next Heritage Committee meeting. So we're targeting that meeting for the staff report, at which point we would look to have the applicants present again. I think there's some important questions and feedback that we heard today that they can look to potentially incorporate when they present at the main Heritage Committee. And following that, the advice of that and recommendation on the application will then proceed to Planning Committee and Council for a final decision.
Thank you for your support today and your assistance, Alyssa. Really appreciate it. So,
Thanks,
so
Alyssa.
getting tossed into the deep end here for the first one. So I guess we are done for the night then.
You have one last step, Graham. You need to look for a motion to adjourn.
Yes, a motion to adjourn. Mover and a seconder. See Carol and Katie again. We'll continue on with that group.
Okay, thanks, Graham.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time, reading the reports, and putting your input. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Graham.
Really appreciate staff for supporting me in my first time in this chair.
You're good.
Thanks for
And-
stepping up, Graham.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Alyssa, you and I going to sort of get together for minutes, or what's going on now?
I will connect with you after we log off and turn off the live stream.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.